Hi and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by Eisha Mhatre. Eisha is a scientist, science writer, and founder of the science communication platform, The Experimentalist. She obtained her PhD in microbiology from Friedrich Schiller University Jena. During her postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh, she discovered improv at the local Steel City Theater. She not only fell in love with performing arts, but also used some of the lessons in her science presentations and networking with other scientists. Inspired by improv, Eisha expanded The Experimentalist to include improv for scientists and science storytelling workshops, helping researchers communicate with clarity and confidence. Through her work, she bridges science and storytelling, features amazing scientists, and showcases the creative process behind building science ideas. Welcome, Eisha. So let's talk about the improv for scientists journey and how did that get started and what was that all like?
So when I was doing my postdoc at University of Pittsburgh, I was also living near improv theater. I happened to watch improv show, and they also had an improv workshop. Most of the improv first workshops are free to attend, right? So I gave it a try, and one thing led to another, and did like 4 workshops with them. As a science student, or as a like person who's always aimed to be in academia, I never ventured into performing arts and what this thing is, but I love it. I love that I can perform something, and so I loved doing that. I kept going to the classes, and I felt that this kind of brought change in the way I networked around science. I became more aware of myself when I'm presenting. When I was venturing into what I can do after my postdoc, pandemic happened, and so many things happened. I was invited to give talk to a bunch of students to understand what is happening around our world. I was speaking to people who had no idea about biology. I was not using scientific terms. I was using terms where I would make them understand what is happening in our world. And I loved that interaction. And I felt lots of good stuff that I learned or I kind of like absorbed from improv, I was using in these interactions. I was using pop culture references. I was not turning into a comedian, but I was making it a kind of a dialogue where they feel approachable. They feel that, okay, I'm loving this conversation. I want to hear more. So I felt that I love this. I love doing this. And when there was this big question, like, what am I doing? Am I continuing in academia? I have to apply for faculty jobs. That also happened. I had to change countries. Like I had to leave US where I was doing my postdoc. And what am I doing next? I was applying to grants. I was applying to other postdoc positions. I was also applying to faculty positions and also interviewing for some. Everything all at once was happening. And that's when I thought that, I don't love this anymore, whatever is going in my professional academic life. I love interacting with other people about science and what we do as science. And at the same time, I also want to bring this new nuggets of improv to the science communication world. There are many like me who are using performing arts, who are using storytelling, who are using different formats of science communication and want to collaborate, want to work with universities, want to work with early career scientists to the professors, and change how we tell our science stories. So this is how I started thinking about, like, okay, improv for scientists is something that I would want to do. That exploratory workshop became kind of a workshop that I give to scientists who have no idea what improv is. And at the same time, the experimentalist became that platform where, of course, I host workshops. At the same time, I also feature scientists. So that's how it all came into being.
What do you do in your workshops? Like, what are the kind of creative tools that scientists learn in your science storytelling and improv workshops? And why do you think it's important for them to learn these things?
So when I started improv, the main message that I loved was that improv has this rule called yes and. So yes and is not about like affirmation to everything, but it's about like accepting whatever is going around you and adding to it. Even if it's chaos, it's like adding to it in a way that you best understand. as scientists, we are often, used to judge one another. We want to be right always and point out if you hear something wrong and fact check everything. If you apply this small technique of yes and in our lab meetings or in the way we talk to our colleagues, you might have a more cordial relationships with your colleagues who are also your competitors, but at the same time you can have more better exchange of ideas. The ideas don't conflict with each other, but kind of like collaborate and have a like smooth way forward. And so this is something that I do in my workshops. I introduce the basic improv uh, tools like yes and how to go about in the stage on the stage, how to work, do scenes with the partner, so everything that an improv artist does. So there is kind of an introduction to the improv. And once that happens, once the scientists know okay what improv actually is, then we kind of explore what we can do with improv as scientists and how we can use it in our storytelling format. So one thing that improv does is it's unscripted, right? So everything that you do or you say is on the stage when you are on a spotlight. So when you are on a spotlight, how do you think fast? How do you have creative exchange? Just the creative exploration of what else can happen is something that is so rewarding. So I do improv where you have this creative exploring, creative ideas, creative thinking, or if this is true, then what else is true? So that is one set of improv for scientist workshop. The other set is because improv makes you aware of what you do when you are in spotlight, how to tone your voice, how to have a best way to say things that you are more passionate about. I'm also still learning. I'm not the best communicator there is, but it just makes you aware that okay, I have to slow down. My audience is not getting what I'm speaking, so I need to change the way I say it. So my part of my improv class is also about paying attention to how you speak, how you what's your body language, and playing with it, like trying different characters, trying different personalities, playing with those and see if that works for you. And so you can use it in your presentation. You can use it to mask your nervousness. You can use it to make yourself more aware of like being in that present moment where you are in the spotlight. There is also an additional storytelling workshop where it's not improv, but it's an addition to it, which is about how do you tell stories like a performing artist. Now, we all love stories, right? We all love a good comedian set or a good movie, right? What goes behind making those stories that get us hooked? There is a format to it, right? Like they think about each and every scene, which scene comes first, which scene comes afterwards. We scientists think about our data, but we don't think about in what way we are going to make the audience understand this data. Is this flow okay? Is this flow not okay? So there is a storytelling workshop where we try different tools that performing artists already have used since generations, and trying, like, say, comedians do it this way. Comedians use this technique. Can we use this technique in the way we are telling our stories? Let's try it. We already have the story. We already have a script. We just have to add spice to it so that it is interesting. And in no way we are dumbing down the science. We are not making science a comedy show, but we are making it interesting enough that it gets eyeballs, it gets attention. So this is a second layer of workshop. And the third layer of workshop is something that I love doing, is how do you connect with different kinds of audiences. So how do you change what you have depending on who you are talking to? If you're talking to a bunch of students, you have a different way of approaching them. But if you're talking to a bunch of adults or even your family who wants to be interested in you but still doesn't want to have the technical terms, how are you going to change your tone, or how you're going to change your words to make them understand? what examples you're going to use. So it is about knowing your audience. So these are the three workshops. It's always evolving. Because they're always evolving, it's also like a learning graph for me that, okay, what else I can include in the workshop. But these are the three simplified versions of my workshop so far.
Here in the US, in the times we're in, where science is being defunded for any number of reasons, many of which are political, related to the content of the scientific study itself, it's really important to be able to kind of like step into that role of talking to the policymaker and helping them understand why one's research is important. And it's not even just about the science, it's about like, I've heard so many scientists be like, oh, I'm such a nerd. I don't have any skills. None of my skills are transferable, but scientists could totally do improv and be more engaging and seize the moment. Because one thing about improv is you seize the moment and you just kind of, it's like a performance art. And that's something that we don't really learn in the lab because sometimes we're not even with other people in the lab. So how many people have done this training? What's the reaction been like? How does it help them? Do people, like, how long have you been doing this anyway?
It started mid 2023 when I started doing it with bunch of university students from PhDs to masters to postdocs and professors as well. I have actually seen their progress through the improv, learning of improv. And what I see in general is there is always an inhibition that, oh, I don't know how to do this. Like, okay, I'm put in spotlight. How do I do it? It is really important to tell people that, this is a safe place and you're just learning a skill. It is not something where you have to excel in, because science people are always about like, oh, I'm bad at this, I'm not going to do this. I'm not expert at this, I'm not going to do this. So they want to be expert, they are perfectionist. And so I start by telling them that it's okay to not be perfectionist at this, but let's just give it this a try. Like let's just be open to trying this. It is also about having fun. These kind of workshops really help them explore the fun side uh, of telling their science stories. And there are no rules, right? So the workshop can go the way the participants want it to go. So that's why they really love the unscripted form of the workshops. So we explore more about how we can use improv for science communication rather than learning improv, so or exploring more basic improv. People come back to me saying, can you do a story writing workshop, or can you do a manuscript writing workshop, and can we have the improv elements in that? So we are thinking about doing storytelling and writing workshops, science writing workshops with a bit of like performing arts uh, playbook, or using um, uh, tricks and tips from the story writing of like performing arts world. So we try to do that. I am always looking for like exploring and evolving these workshops into better setup. Because I just started like 1.5 years ago, it's also learning for me like what else is out there. So if there are other improvisers, if there are other storytellers, other science communicators who also do workshops, how do they go about it? What I really enjoyed was reading about Alan Alda. So Alan Alda is an American producer and an actor who does science communication workshops in Stony Brook, uh, in New York. And I learned so much from his books.
He's really famous. He used to have that show MASH. Have you ever watched MASH?
No, I haven't watched the show, but I have read his books, and his books have helped me a lot in how to shape my improv classes.
Well, he's a former actor. So, what lessons did you learn from Alan Alda on communicating science and improv? Because MASH is also funny.
So most of his books are about how when scientists talk, people don't understand, and how to talk differently, like so that people understand you. So how to build that connection. I love his stories about how he talks about his dentist and how he did not understand what the dentist was doing and everything. What I also learned in my improv classes, and it got validated when I read his books, was the power of three. If you want to give examples, it's always nice to give three examples, because one or two is far less for people to understand. Four is too many. So always have three examples when you have stories, and many more. I can do a, like, whole show about like what Alan Alda's methods are. And it's nice that person from performing arts has paid that much attention to how scientists are and how scientists speak, and tried to help scientists to act on it and break that ice, and go about being interesting people.
It seemed very unlikely to me that the star of MASH would become a science communicator, because MASH was one of those shows. I think it was about the Korean War. It was like a military, I want to say comedy, kind of dramatic at times. I grew up watching it, so I guess it wasn't that violent or anything, even though it was about a war, but there was a lot of comedic aspects. So, but it seems unlikely that out of that show, I guess it had to do with medicine, but that Alan Alda would become like an advocate for science communication. To me, that just seems like the most random thing ever.
Scientific American actually brought him to interview scientists. And then the Stony Brook started Alan Alda Center for Communication because of that sort of thing. So I think it really resonated with some people, and some people who really wanted to change how scientists tell our stories.
Especially in the current times we're in, we definitely need someone to tell us how to communicate, because it feels like science is kind of getting shut down here in the US, and it doesn't have to be that way. If scientists communicate, I don't know what it could be, whether scientists communicate differently, they are more engaged civically, like at the Stand Up for Science rallies that just happened all over the country. I interviewed one of the founders of Stand Up for Science, JP Flores, which I'll link in the description box. But there's a lot of room for scientists to be involved and to kind of learn these skills like improv, like political engagement, which a lot of that is very improvisational, because politicians don't have a lot of time. They just want to know what's in what you why you're talking to them and what you want, basically. And improv helps a lot with that, because politicians are also very improvisational and relational in their communication styles. So who knows, maybe learning improv like would help you if you went to your lawmaker's office and especially if you could like turn what you were saying into a joke to make them laugh. I think that'd be really fun. All of that requires really quick thinking, and it requires you to read the room. And sometimes with our analytical brains, we're used to looking at the data and crunching the data. We're not as used to reading the room. I mean, we are, because we are social creatures as scientists. We exist in society, but we don't get training on like improv in science, but it would be really useful to have that training.
The way I say it that, all my life I've been taught to think critically. Like, okay, does it make sense? What are the observations? What is the hypothesis? And how do I think about this in a broad sense? But we have never taught to think creatively. Like, how does it make sense? Okay, it makes sense to me, but how do I make sense to you? That part is always missing in our training as scientists. But then it is changing, like, when you it comes to you and me talking and using words to communicate. I think there are so many things that we can do, and of course improv is one way to master it. But then there are so many other things that we can learn from performing artists, like how they hold attention. One thing that I felt when I watch movies, and I love watching movies, right? I always go to, of course, YouTube, because it has so many videos, or some other place where you can find the director's interview, or actor's interview, telling you what went behind the scenes and why they did the scene this way and not the other way, or what was the thought behind putting a scene this way or that way. I was like, wow, if in our science stories we talk about the process behind it, like, why did we think of doing the experiment for a week? as opposed to doing it for 3 days. Like if we give people exposure to our behind the scene process, like how we do science, how the ideas get implemented in terms of experiments, and how the experiments then become results and inferences. So that process is so interesting, and for you and me who are scientists and who've worked with scientists, we know that process. It's just that not a lot of people know that process. So we also need to speak about our process because it is interesting. It is as interesting as the movie maker talks about his process. So we should talk about our processes, I feel. And also, when we say science stories, this is also something that you said, that people don't listen to scientists, or we don't know how to talk to scientists. But we don't put scientists in our science stories. If you see lots of popular science articles, they talk about the universities, they talk about the discovery, but the scientists are missing in their stories.
It's always like we discovered this, but we never talk about, oh, actually this person, they didn't sleep for like 3 months to get that, or
I
like
know,
their wife
right?
left them or something. Or when you read the stories of older scientists, like Rita Levi Montalcini won the Nobel Prize for discovering a growth factor. And one thing she did was she ran a lab out of her house. Marie Curie ran a lab out of her house. Like, can you imagine Marie and Pierre Curie in their house with all that radioactive stuff, like just in their house? Like, it's amazing the sacrifices that they made. And then, like, I
That's
go
what
to
they
the
used
lab.
to. I mean, you can imagine, right? When you are both working professionals in the house, of course there is exchange of ideas, but at the same time there is argument. Let's have
There's
that part.
arguments. Yeah, and like the time that I wanted to write a paper, but the first step in writing the paper was just emailing my collaborator and saying, I don't want to work on this. I don't have time. Like, I don't think this is a good idea. But then we published our paper finally 4 years later. But so many times during that process, I was like, I don't even think this is possible. Or the days that when I had left graduate school and it was in the middle of COVID pandemic and everyone was talking about science. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go to the library and I'm gonna um, research my topic. And I honestly sacrificed so much, and it felt weird. And I went to the library every Saturday, and I worked. And sometimes I felt like working, sometimes I didn't feel like working, but I did it, and I wrote a 30-page paper, and I didn't think that was possible. But then, because no one talks about these stories of like the incredible struggles that especially women in science have faced, so then I go to the lab and I'm like, oh, this should be easy. But it's not easy because you're just creating something completely new, looking at something the way no one has ever looked at it before. And in many ways, especially in our current funding landscape where everything's getting defunded, you're just trying to make something out of nothing. And you can't make something out of nothing. Like that does just defies everything we know about like the laws of the universe. You have to put work into something to get something out. And I think that gets glossed over a lot of times because we're like, oh yeah, we can just go do science, but it's actually a lot of setbacks and challenges.
It is also important to talk about these struggles, because when you see other scientists publishing papers or talking about, hey, we published a paper and we published this amazing story, or popular science picking that up and talking about it, of course, we all are celebrating the new discovery. But then there are also scientists like us who are also like writing our papers and struggling at the same time. We are like, okay, when are we going to reach that stage? It looks very hunky dory, but it's not that. There are also struggles that went behind, right? I'll tell you this example where I did a story on Experimentalist with this amazing researcher, Maria Tolreira. So she works with Arctic bacteria, and she discovered how the Arctic bacteria evolves to grow in the in temperatures that are like beyond their capacities to grow in, like how they evolve these proteins and different methods or different genetic tools to evolve on these rapidly higher temperatures, and what goes behind adjusting our molecular soup to these temperatures, which is very interesting story, right? Because even minute degrees in degree changes in temperatures are going to affect our molecular systems. And she works on these bacteria and sees how, when these bacteria are exposed to um, higher temperatures, what happens with them and how they evolve and what goes behind these evolution. It's an interesting story, and every popular science journal picked it up. When I spoke to her, she told me that yes, it got published in Science, but it took like 2 years and back and forth, and between that she had a baby. She had to also reach out, come back to the lab and do certain other experiments because the publication needed it. And then there was like big long wait until the success story happened, right? So we are talking about everyone who goes through all these channels, but we don't want to talk about it. Why not? Let's talk about the struggles. Let's talk about that academia is a long route to success, and every time whatever you want, your ideas sometimes get dropped, your grants don't get funded, and so you need to reroute and reimagine how you want to make things work. That's why I think the scientists need improv or a stage where they can bring these stories to light, and tell people that we are like everyone else, we are also humans, we also go through rejections more often than
Yeah, there's
other.
so many right now. Just right in the past, however long since President Donald Trump took office, I've been trying to keep track. He canceled grants, he fired researchers. I think some researchers are getting reinstated, but many people are getting noticed that their grants are being canceled. Certain words are being like, I guess the government is scanning PubMed and looking for words like woman, and it's like, this isn't something that is new to science. Like, for example, in World War II, um, Germany had a lot of Jewish physicists and they were studying quantum physics. But because they lived in Nazi Germany at the time, Germany actually didn't really believe in quantum physics. So a lot of those people moved away from Germany. And that just left, like, I think there were a few scientists that stayed in Germany, and it was very hard for them to study quantum physics. But like, I can't imagine what it was like to be studying quantum physics in Nazi Germany as a Jewish person. I want to believe that we will never go back to that. But when I see the news of the stuff that's happening today with science, and how political it is, and how powerless it leaves the scientists without jobs, without grant money. Without grant money, you can't do science. So, but it's also, it's like when I left graduate school in 2013, no one noticed that I left graduate school. There was nothing on the news about Shiva Asma has left graduate school and got a master's. It was just such little fanfare, and it was up to me to just find a new career path. Like, at least people are talking about this, but the fact remains that probably lots of scientists are going to have to redirect and find new careers, or they may wish to just exit science. Like, even if they get their grants back, they might not want to work in a system that is constantly devaluing their work. So it's like, this is why we need skills like improv to, because when you're a scientist, but you also have the skill of improv, that allows you to adapt in situations and be flexible and think and read the room and try to create new connections between things from your science mind and things from your improv mind. And maybe there's something really cool there. What do you think about that?
I definitely second that. We so when we do workshops where you pay attention to how your body functions when you talk, or what kind of hand movements you know are your natural ones when you're talking. So when we do these workshops on how you use your voice, how you modulate your body movements, we think we do go on like, okay, the psyche of it, like, okay, are you afraid, are you nervous, are you anxious? And so there are also other battles that scientists have, right? Like, oh, I had a rejection, how do I convince my thesis committee that this is a good project and I have to go and find another grants or another publishing journal? How do I navigate this? And so keeping your thoughts and assembling them is also something that you can do, or explore with improv, right? Okay, if this is true, what else is true? Let's go to the dark space and come out again. Let's try different situations. So this is something that I love about improv, that you can bring those situations in your scene work and explore where this is going. We did this scene where the person wanted to tell her PI or boss that I don't like working with you because your criticisms are harsh. And we are like, okay, try that in the scene. Let your scene partner be your boss, and just see where that goes. Just let animate, like, or just play the situation and see, because you are already playing that in your head. Let's try it in the real improv stage and see where that goes. So we can tackle so many of these situations that we go through as scientists in our real world on the improv stage, and say that, hey, you know what, maybe this is a best strategy, maybe that is a best strategy, this is what I'm going to use in my real conversations. you know you can experiment so much on an improv stage. And adding to what you just said, that we can't use so many words, and now we want to like reiterate how we tell our grants. This is such a bad thing happening, because I also help a scientist edit their grants, and we were just discussing with bunch of scientists. These grants are so good and so needed for the time we are living in. They are curing cancers, they're curing Alzheimer's, they're curing different other things.
One part that's missing for scientists is this ability to, we can do it with our science. Like, let's say we ran out of reagent. We can go with the flow and like either borrow some reagent from someone or something, but it's different for like improv. Like it's harder to go off the cuff as a scientist because a lot of the stuff we talk about is very complex.
Improv opens so many world of possibilities. Like, for example, we are trained, like, if my experiments do not work, I can try different parameters, I can change certain variables. So when you do improv, when you're used to doing improv, when you're used to observing these subtle changes, or you're used to observing subtle cues around you, like you're so used to being like, okay, what else is happening? My partner did this, can I borrow this in the scene? When you're used to all this thing, of course you are going to apply that in your real life, right? So even if your reagent gets over, of course, as a scientist, you will go and say that, okay, how do I repeat this experiment again using different reagent? But at the same time, as a person who has done improv, and who has this knack of exploring other possibilities, will be like, okay, how can I do this differently? And how can I have a different approach to it? What else is true, right? Like, what other things that I can still use? So there are ways in which improv opens you up to observing more than you can. It just opens you up to finding small things that probably before you did not even observe. And that's amazing, right? Like, as a scientist who can observe much more, improv just helps them to be more versatile and be more like, oh, if this is true, what else is true?
I think we should scientists should have more of that. Like, let's say you're giving a talk and someone you present something and someone raises their hand and like they're like, "Hey, is that really right?" And like, of course it's really right because like you did this work, but they just want to get it in there that like, oh, maybe you're not right after all because they have their own pet theory. I wish that scientists could use their improv skills to just turn that back around, or not like to insult that person, but to say like, yes, this is right, and also your thing could be right. I see scientists kind of like going at it and being confrontational at their talk. I used to see this at their talks. I don't know if they do that anymore.
What they do all the time, we always want to be right, right?
I've seen talks, they just raise a hand and they ask a question, and it's like, I'm sorry, like, were you even paying attention to this talk? Like, they just described this brilliant thing. Why are you criticizing them? And I just love to see someone that got one of those really weird, mean questions, just turn it around and turn it into opportunity for talking about something else. And I think that's something you can do with when you learn improv skills, or you can even turn it into like a funny moment or something. So I think improv probably could help scientists be better scientists and deal with some of the different social and communicational aspects of science and talk to lawmakers. I just really think we should all be doing improv. I've never done improv.
I mean, I'm telling you, at my improv classes, there were people in hospitality industry, there were doctors, there were teachers who just wanted to know what improv is and how can they use in their own professional lives. Um, yes, improv helps. everywhere, and it is not only about talking, it is not only when you are in the spotlight, but hey, you are in spotlight every time, right? Even when you are doing experiments, even when you are attending a conference, you're always on the spotlight. Improv shapes how you think about yourself and how you let go of things, how you let go of the regret meter that you have. Like, it just gets you through many things that maybe increase your anxiety and you keep thinking about it all the time. It also helps you to like rechannel your attention to something else.
I've been trying to have a better presence, like, like news people, like, welcome to the nightly newscast. Like, I want to be like them and like have a really good presence and stuff. But so, how can people get in touch with you if they're like scientists and they're interested in doing improv? We'll put their social media handles in the description box. But is there anything you'd like to shout out so that people can learn more about your improv work?
Yeah, so I used to do that until last year, where every month I used to have a free improv class where I used to try different activities and exercise. And also, it was a place for other people to join in and know what improv is. And I made lots of connections through these free classes. So most of the ways you can have improv with me or improv for scientist workshop set up with me is, let's organize it in your department or institute or at a conference or at a PhD or postdoc day, so that we can have a session, like 2 to 3 hours session, where we can try different improv and see how improv can help us communicate stories like scientists. So that's the best way. You can write to me on my LinkedIn profiles. At the same time, you can also get in touch with me on the experimentalist.org. There is a page where you can get in touch and let's talk about improv. Let's talk about setting up and organizing an improv for scientist workshop for your audience or for your community. I just moved to Arizona and I'm still getting settled here. So I'm trying to bring back the free improv class or maybe organize an improv class for different people. Um, on Experimentalist. It might take some time. Maybe I will try that in summer. But I am always open to, doing an improv for scientist workshop when people are interested to adopt that in their conference or departmental retreats or even lab meetings. We can also do an improv for scientist workshop at your lab meeting.
That would be fun. I've had some pretty bad lab meetings, but learning improv would be actually cool. Like,
Yeah,
well,
totally.
I shouldn't diss lab meetings. Lab meetings are really important. It has been great talking to you, Isha. And again, you run the science communication platform, The Experimentalist. Um, what do you do besides improv at The Experimentalist?
So we feature scientists. We love to hear science stories, science communication stories, science events, and outreach. So I want this experimentalist to become a hub where we tell science stories, and they reach out to scientists in a different light, not like only about your discoveries, but also knowing the humans behind the people working on these amazing research projects. If you want to be featured on Experimentalist, then also get in touch with me. I'm always looking for collaborations with different other science communicators to organize such an event. So I am always busy with those. Just last year, with Open Innovations in Life Sciences, I organized Open Science, a conference talking about open science and how artificial intelligence comes in in all this. It was a nice gig, and I always love organizing such events. When I became a science communicator, I did not want to define what I do. I know I need to define what I do, but it's like everything is so interesting, right? This is also interesting, that is also interesting. So I'm always looking up for different learning experiences, different collaborations. And if you want to organize a science communication workshop with bit of improv and bit of your skill set, so we can also talk about this.
Yeah, that could be cool to have improv be like a part of science communication training. As scientists, especially in our current times, we have to think outside of the lab because the money for science comes from outside of the lab. It comes from non scientists. So we spend a lot of our life in the lab, but we also step outside of our lab roles. A lot of people, maybe they are leaving science right now. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with everything because there's so much happening politically, but at least with the federal grant funding, which is pretty much how all scientists in academia get their funding. But that's why we have to be agile. As a small business owner, you have to be agile. You have to roll with the punches, so to speak. And that's what improv is all about as well. It would be good if we had more scientists that were trained in ways to communicate like that, just off the cuff. That would make them have an additional skill. It would make them more able to interact with all types of people, non-scientists, scientists, lawmakers, kids, grown-ups, people they see grocery shopping. Um, so yeah. Um, so thank you for your time today, Eisha. It has been great talking to you and learning about improv for science communication.
It was great talking to you. I hope I convinced your viewers that improv is amazing.
Thank you for your time today, and thanks for telling all of our viewers slash listeners, if they, well, viewers, because this is our YouTube channel, about improv for science communication.
Yeah.